is Allein Moore, and I'm at Spikes Asia 2012, and I'm talking this afternoon to Rei Inamoto, who is the Chief Creative Officer of AKQA in Japan. And he gave an extremely interesting talk this afternoon, but I would like first to ask you, Rei, just tell me a little bit about your background. How did you start in advertising?
Well, when I get asked that question, how I got started in advertising, my usual answer is that I didn't. And I never got into this into the advertising industry, and I'm still in denial that I'm in advertising because I never wanted to, create advertising. I wasn't informed enough to know that advertising was an industry to begin with. So when I was in college, I started to study fine arts, and halfway through, this is in the 90s, I decided to add computer science as my second degree. It took me a while to graduate, but what I was fascinated by was this intersection of creativity and software, creativity and technology, and I wanted to explore the new possibilities of technology as it was applied to creativity. So I just didn't know better that advertising was an industry that you can get paid to be creative. And to this day, I don't necessarily create advertising the same way that other agencies and other people do. We at AKQA, one of the things that we say is that the best advertising isn't advertising, which is similar to the talk that I just gave. The future of advertising isn't advertising. And we fundamentally believe that our job is to create connections, meaningful connections between brands and consumers, and that's what we do. And what we do, if that becomes advertising, great. That's sort of the point of view that I have. My first creative job was when I was graduating from college. I went to school first. Before college, I went to school in Switzerland, and then I went to the States to study fine arts, and then I added computer science as my second degree. When I was graduating, I went back to Tokyo to sort of explore the industry or the job that I can get a job. And the job that I found was at a tiny creative non-advertising studio. The main guy who was the creative director, and then he's a designer, and I was the apprentice for that studio. And he was doing anything from traditional design, things like book covers to album covers to those types of posters, those types of traditional graphic design. He was also doing event art direction and creative direction. He was doing installation, museum installation. That was one of the projects that he was working on. So he was a very, very diverse creative thinker. And eventually he started to get gigs through advertising agencies. And then before you knew it, he was creating interesting ideas for some of the major brands in Japan. So that was my first gig that I had right after school. And then moved to the States and worked as a designer in an agency. And then went to a more sort of technology-based company called RGA in the late 90s. And then I came to AKQA in 2004.
The title of your talk was "The Future of Advertising Isn't Advertising." Would you just like to explain it a little more?
The future of advertising isn't advertising. That's a conviction that I started to have fairly recently, probably in the past 6 to 12 months or so. I don't claim to know the answer to that question, what is the future of advertising? And I also don't believe that there's one single answer to that question. I think there are multiple entry points and multiple ways that we can explore to discover and build what could be the future of advertising. So a few things, instead of things like TV, print, out-of-home radio, even digital, I believe that software can be the new advertising vehicle for brands. Instead of media, buying media placements, I believe that products products need to be designed from the get-go with marketing in mind. It's almost too late to think about marketing after you create the product. if you can bake marketing into your product development, then the product becomes that much better, and then your marketing can become much better, and then you don't have to necessarily rely on media to spread the word. I also believe that instead of telling stories, I believe that brands have to behaving in certain ways that would prove sort of the message that they might want to distribute. So instead of storytelling or brand story, I think it should be about brand behavior. The fourth thing is that in this industry we like to create campaigns, and that's been the assumption for agencies and brands to do. But instead of creating campaigns, I believe that brands need to build franchises for themselves that they can own. They can even monetize those franchises. So those are sort of ownable platforms, ownable programs that they own, that's unique to them, that then become a franchise. And then the last thing, shifting from 360 to 365, just by adding the number 5 to 360 can become a fundamentally different thing. Up until now, for the past 20, 30 years or so, I think a lot of advertisers and agencies spend much of their effort and money to create this 360 degrees of communication. Now I think we are in an era where brands should try to create 365 days of connection. And that's where agencies like AKQA, that's where we help the brands.
Rei, could you just tell me what you mean by franchising a brand?
One tangible example that was actually awarded really well and highly in Cannes this year is an idea called Small Business Saturday by American Express. In the United States, there's right after Thanksgiving, there's the Black Friday where everybody goes out shopping. Small Business Saturday is a day, that Saturday right after Thanksgiving, where American Express would encourage people in different communities to shop local, shop at their local small businesses to support the local community. And American Express as a major corporate credit card company, yeah, they support big businesses, but also this is a way for them to show their support for small businesses, so that they provide tools, they provide kits to these small businesses to promote their local businesses to their community people. That's a franchise that American Express started, and now they own. And it's almost a movement. That's probably another way of putting it. It's a movement that a brand can own and can repeat to make it into a bigger thing.
My last question is, what advice would you give to a young person coming into the advertising industry?
This is a piece of advice that I wish I had heard when I was younger, and it's a piece of advice that came from a guy named Paul Arden, British art director. Wrote a book with this title, It's Not How Good You Are, but It's How Good You Want to Be. I really wish that I knew that piece of advice when I was 20, 21, because I think I was, kind of insecure about my future, my talent, my skill, and in a way, that gave me reasons to try harder. But if somebody had told me, you know what, it's about how hard you try, it's not about how good you are, it's about how good you want to be, then I think I would have been encouraged much more. I'm glad that I know that quote now, and I pass on that to every young person who's trying to get into this industry or anything else for that matter.
Rei, thank you so much for talking to AdAsia.